Magnus Carlsen may not have started Tata Steel Chess Masters in a fantastic way, as he lost 2 games in a row at one point. But guys, I think that after today's round, we can say that the Magnus Carlsen we know is back. Now, this is round number 10 of Tata Steel Chess Masters, and I'm going to start by showing you the Parham Magsudlu game. I'm so sorry, I know I'm pronouncing this very wrong. Versus Magnus Carlsen. Now, Parham has been World Junior Chess Champion in the past, and he started with the move d4. This became a Queen's Gambit, declined, and actually Parham captured on d5, and this is called the exchange line. Now, this is actually a line that I play and the line that I've played for years. It's my favorite Queen's Gambit line because you never allow black to capture on c4, so you never have to think about that. You don't have to deal with this pawn on c4. So here, bishop e7 taking away the pin, and now bishop g4 was played by Magnus. The reason he went here is because actually a lot of times whites will go bishop d3 and queen c2 to not allow the bishop to come up to g4 with the tempo threatening the queen. And a lot of times you want to go bishop h5 and bishop g6 and exchange the bishop or put the bishop over here, as the bishop is not well placed on any of these other squares. So queen a4 check, c6, and bishop d3. Now Parham is placing his bishop in a fantastic diagonal. h3, bishop h5, and now the queen goes back to c2. So now at least this pawn is on c6. The knight will never come up to c6. But black played c5, trying to get the knight up to c6, as the knight is much better here than what it is on, for instance, d7. So here Parham went straight up g4. All for the attack, and I actually think that this is pretty cool. And actually in this position, Magnus is sacrificing a pawn, because after takes and takes, Magnus has to go bishop g6, and this actually does lose a pawn, as after takes and takes and takes, we can see that the f7 pawn is gone. So Magnus Carlsen sacrificed the pawn, but what he's basically saying is that Parham right now, he has a very unsafe king. I mean, it sort of looks like g4 was played to attack Magnus, but actually it's Parham's king that is the most unsafe one. He is a little bit undeveloped, but mostly he doesn't have any attack, and this king is going to be pretty unsafe. So actually Magnus has quite a lot of compensation here for the pawn. In this position, Magnus did a fantastic move. He went knight takes g4, which is actually just fascinating. Now, why is this move so fascinating? Because he's straight up giving up a piece. Not really, but it looks like it, you know? And the reason why he's not giving up a piece, it's why it's just so brilliant. Because now if Parham would capture back the knight on g4, then the bishop on h4 would be hanging. And if Parham would capture on e7, then Magnus would capture back with the check and then move his knight. So Parham went for the sneaky check on e6, rook f7, and now actually the idea is once again that if captures, then there's this captures. And if bishop captures on e7, then there's going to be queen takes e7. And after the exchange of queens, once again, it's going to be check. So Magnus is never losing a piece. He actually just won the pawn back. So h takes g4 and bishop takes h4. And now Parham went knight f3, which is a good move, developing and also attacking the bishop. Queen f6 was played. There was an exchange. And now Magnus' pawn on d5 fell. So we can see that constantly, I mean, Magnus is like giving up a pawn, but actually just Magnus' position is equal or slightly better, because Parham just doesn't have that much initiative, and he also has the issue of this king, and this pawn is a little bit weak as well. But this is definitely like a quite equal position, but it's not like Magnus is worse because he's given up a pawn, to put it that way. So rook e4, and now we can see that the d4 pawn is weak, the g4 pawn is weak, several pawns are weak, and now Parham started to push the pawn, and this pawn, it looked pretty scary, but actually at this point, Magnus had so much more time than Parham. Like, I think Parham had like 12 minutes versus Magnus 50. Like, Magnus was playing really fast, and actually that is pretty important. Here Magnus played knight c2 check, which is really nice. Simply exchanging the knights, this pawn is going to become very weak as well. But actually, he's able to capture on g4, which is the main idea. And now, I mean, this pawn, it looks really scary. But if d7, like, then there'll just be bishop d8 and the pawn will be blocked. So it's actually not as scary as one might think. But it's a very double Dutch position. Rook d7, and now Parham went for rook f1. He was very low on time at this point. You have to remember that. And after rook f1, he actually just gave up a pawn. the pawn on b2 is just straight up hanging. So Parham actually blundered a pawn. In this position, he should have gone b3 and defended. But then the thing is that there's rook b2 check and, sorry, rook g2 check, and then the a2 pawn is going to be hanging. But it's still much better to give up that pawn than the b2 pawn, because in this position, Parham is just straight up a pawn down, and there's still the ideas of going sometimes rook g2 check, and the a2 pawn is going to become very weak as well. So here, Parham went rook d3, and now bishop f6. Magnus just bringing the bishop back, saying, thanks, Parham, for giving me the pawn. Rook d5, and now he's trying to get the rook. He's trying to get in with the rook on the other side, so Parham is just going here to be able to block the checks. King f7, the king is coming up. I mean, Magnus just bringing up the king to the center. And now, I mean, Magnus just straight up a pawn up, but it's not just that. It's that Magnus also has these two pass pawns that are absolutely amazing. And here Magnus just sacrifices a rook. The idea being that after rook takes a3, well, it's not really a rook sacrifice because there's king takes d5, right? So this is really pretty. The pawn on a7 is hanging, but the d6 pawn is also hanging. So in this position, I mean, Magnus just ends up being 2 pawns up in the endgame, and we can see how he continues. But I just think this is absolutely fascinating how he was able to just get a couple pawns here against the strong player. So now rook takes e5, really important. If it would capture here, then Parham would have time to make a queen. So now king d1, and now this is actually a really nice endgame to know. Basically, to stop the b pawn, the king needs to get to b1, but because Magnus' rook is on the c file, he's cutting off the king, and now Magnus is just completely winning. If this king was on b1, this would actually be a draw, but because the king is cut off, it's not, and that is a really important point here. So yeah, he just kept on going. He just kept on going with the pawn, and this is actually really pretty. And now after rook a5 and rook d5, cutting off the king even more, because the king needs to go to the e file, as if king c3, there is king c1, and there's no way of stopping the promotion of the pawn, as there's no checks on the c file. This actually just became a win now for Magnus. Parham resigned in this position, and Magnus won in 56 moves. But actually, I think this game was really nice. I think it was Parham, he blundered a pawn at one point, but it was a really nice game. And Magnus Carlsen is now back with 6 points. It's 1 point away from the leader, but Magnus actually has chances of winning the tournament. Maybe Magnus will win. Who knows? It's going to be really exciting to see. But now we're going to jump up to the next game. And the next game that I'm going to show you is of Nodirbek Abdusattorov, the 18-year-old guy that has been making headlines in this tournament, because he's been leading the tournament the whole time. This guy is doing a performance of 2,900. He's gaining over 25 points of rating, which at this level is huge. And today he played against Jurriaan, who is the #2 player in the world. Now the game went e4, e5, knight f3, and I really just wanted to show you this game because I just want to show you how fascinating the journey of Nodirbek is. It was perhaps not the most exciting game in the world. The final game that I'll show you is really exciting, but it was a short game, and I just really want to show you how fantastic this journey is. So knight takes e4, rook e1. We have right now a Ruy Lopez, knight d6, and now this became a big exchange of pawns in the e file. And yeah, the position becomes pretty symmetrical. But bishop f6, kicking the rook away, and there were a lot of exchanges. And now knight takes 2, able to go d5, which is why Nodirbek goes knight d5, stopping Ding from going d5 himself. Now, Ding at this point, he was probably pretty upset from his loss yesterday. I mean, Ding is not the kind of guy that loses a lot, but yesterday, Jurriaan did lose, and that was not obviously something that I was happy about. So today, I think that he was just trying to keep it very, very safe, because he didn't want to lose 2 games in a row. Because at this level, losing 2 games in a row is just really heartbreaking. And also tomorrow, everybody, there is rest day, so I think that many players just want to get the games over with. So bishop d7, and now d5, pushing the pawn, rook c8, and there was a big exchange of pawns. Queen b3 looking at f7, and now knight d6, attacking the bishop and defending. Rook d1, getting the rook, pinning the knight, and now pinning the knight. Now the queen moves so that it's unpinned. h6, h3, queen e5, king f1, and now there was a repetition of moves, and this game became a draw in 27 moves. It was a super quick draw. That's why I told you that this wasn't such an exciting game, but Noterbeck is still leading the tournament with 7 out of 10 points, and I just find it fascinating because he has not lost a single game. He's beaten Magnus Carlsen, he's beaten a lot of really strong players, but he has not lost a single game, which at the age of 18, being 2,700, I mean, he's the GOAT. Like, what's going on? Is he going to become world champion? This is a fantastic performance that I think really is going to be one of his like biggest breakthroughs in his career. It's absolutely amazing. So we're going to see if he is able to keep this up until the last round, because if he doesn't lose any more game, I mean, he might very much win the whole tournament, which would be huge for him. So now I'm going to show you a really exciting game, and this was the game between the two Indian chess prodigies, Gukesh, 16 years old, and Praggnanandhaa, who is, I believe, 17 years old. So this game became really exciting. It started with c4, c5, and now knight f3, knight f6, knight c3. This became a completely symmetrical English opening. This is the 4 knights variation. I play this myself too as black. I get so happy when I see the super gems playing the lines that I play, because then I understand them a little bit more. So d4, there's always the main idea to try to break through in the center. White wants to go d4 if they can. So now there's a big exchange, and now e6. And actually, this it looks very similar to a Sicilian, but it's just that the pawn is on c4 instead of on e4. Now a3 was played, stopping bishop b4 and pinning, so bishop e7 and e4. And here we have castles, knight f3, and queen a5, pinning the knight. Bishop d2, but actually the queen on a5, it has a different journey. The journey is to go queen h5 and putting the queen over here, getting it to the king side. Rook g1 was played in d5, trying to break through in the center. And this is actually a really pleasant position for black at this point. Typically, if black is able to get d5, they're at least equalizing. But here, Gukesh went for this amazing move. It's actually the only move that doesn't make him have a worse position. G4! Exclamation mark. Amazing. And what is the idea? Well, the idea is that he's right now threatening the queen. He's basically giving up a pawn, but I mean, after knight takes g4, he's claiming that now this king is going to be very unsafe, and he's going to try to castle queenside, and he's going to be attacking this king. So Gukesh is going to go for a full-on attack on black's king. So c takes d5. There's a big exchange of pawns happening here. He's able to win back the d5 pawn immediately, and now bishop c5. And after bishop c5, this f2 pawn is starting to become very weak. So queen e2 was played, sacrificing basically the f2 pawn. But the idea is that now if bishop takes f2, there is actually queen takes f2. And you actually in this position sacrifice the queen, because this is really pretty. After knight takes f2, there is knight f6 check. And this is a pin, and the queen is hanging. So this is why the pawn on f2 is not able to be captured, and instead f5 was played by Praggnanandhaa. So f5, knight f4, threatening the queen, queen f7, and now in this position, rook g2 was played. And the engine thinks that this is a blunder. Why? Because there is f takes e4. And in this position, if f takes e4, I mean, you cannot go queen takes e4 because there's rook e8. So white has to go knight g5, threatening the queen, and queen f5, but this is a much better position for black. Black is a pawn up, and I mean, black has some threats on f2, and it's just much better in this position. White just doesn't really have any crazy attack. I mean, maybe queen c4 check, but there's going to be king g8, and there's actually nothing really crazy going on. But this actually, maybe the only thing that could happen is something like this, and queen takes c5, but then the knight on g5 would also be hanging. So actually in this position, rook g2, this was a blunder because of this, but Praggnanandhaa did not play it. Instead, he went queen e7, which is, according to the engine, a missed win, because he missed this idea of immediately capturing on e4, which would just have given him material advantage. So e5 was played here. Now Gukesh is saying, you didn't take my pawn once, you're not going to take it now. Knight c e5, Praggnanandhaa captured the pawn now. And now Gukesh simply went long castle, saying, I don't care about everything that's going on. My king is going to escape. And I mean, h3 is coming. Attack on this king is coming, knight h5 is coming. What are you gonna do? So this is really pretty. So bishop d6, bishop f6, sneakily looking towards g7. And now after some exchanges and bishop e6, there is just simply knight takes e6. But this was actually a move that was not played by Gukesh. Instead, he did this move h3, which once again is a blunder according to the engine. I mean, I don't want to call this the game of the blunders, but both players are sort of like missing wins, which I think is quite fun to see. I love seeing 2700 chess prodigies missing wins. Like, I love seeing them. Wait, is this mean? I love seeing them making mistakes. No, I don't. I mean, I want everyone to play their best chess. But like, it motivates me, you know? It motivates me to see them doing this. So h3, the knight is now under attack. But yeah, like I said, the best move here would have been to capture and then go h3. But I mean, basically, after h3, there is right now the idea of going bishop takes f4 and then simply going knight f6. This is why it's so important to capture here immediately, because now Gukesh is giving black the option of exchanging the bishop for this knight and not like taking here. But in this position, actually, Praggnanandhaa did a blunder. Another blunder. I'm telling you, this is a game of the blunders. Bishop e5. And after bishop e5, I mean, the reason this is a blunder is because now finally, Gukesh captures on e6. This bishop is such an important defensive piece for the king. Gukesh is going to get the bishop pair. And after queen takes e6, I mean, there is just pawn takes g4. And the question is, why is this not just a free piece? And there's actually no answer to it, right? Because the thing is that here, what Praggnanandhaa's idea initially was that after bishop takes, queen takes, there's going to be rook c8. And if pawn takes, the queen was here, there was going to be queen takes a3. But now the queen is not attacking this pawn. So actually, after takes and pawn takes and rook d8, I mean, Gukesh is just a piece up. It's just a full piece up. But in this position, actually, perhaps there would have been some chances if Praggnanandhaa would have gone something like queen b3 instead rook takes d1 was played. There's nothing wrong with this. Queen takes d1. And now, once again, queen a2. And he's trying to go for a few checks over here. He's trying to capture the pawn. But after bishop d3, I mean, even if black captures the pawn, the king will be able to escape. And now this is just fully one piece up. Queen c2. The queen is blocking. The queen is defending, and this is just a full piece up in this position. So queen h2, and now queen f7, threatening the rook, and there were checks, but the king is able to escape. And now in this position, I mean, the pawn tried to push, rook h, king b2 was the last move. And in this position, Praggnanandhaa resigned. Gukesh won. I mean, this game was kind of crazy. The reason why Praggnanandhaa resigned is because Gukesh is right now just going to be basically checkmating Praggnanandhaa. I mean, the rook is coming in and the king cannot even escape over here because of the bishop. This was a really good win for Gukesh. He's going up in the standings. The standings, speaking of, right now are looking like this. I also have the little link in the description if you want to enter and see, you know, all the previous rounds and how everything has been going. We got a link for that in the description. Noterbeck is leading right now with 7 out of 10, but Magnus is right behind him with 6 points. We will see who wins the tournament, but one thing is for sure, that Magnus is making a crazy comeback.